There's a book. Now, this book here is Arthur Ketchler and the 13th Tribe. Now, we learned something. In order for the people today to be who they say they are, they would have to have 13 tribes in Israel instead of 12. Why? Because these people converted a long time ago. So let's find out, first of all, who are the so called Negroes or indigenous people? Because Indian just simply means indigenous. And we're finding out now that most of the so called Negroes are already here in America and they were just taken into slavery. So let's see if we are African American. Let's read the Zonder's Compact Bible Dictionary. You can also get this on Amazon or you can Google it. So let's read about Ham. That's something I want to read about. So let's read on Ham and let's see, are the so called Negroes actually African? It says here that Ham, the youngest son of Noah, born probably not about 96 years before the flood, and one of 8 persons to live through the flood, he became the progenitor of the dark races, but not, get this, but not the Negroes, but the Egyptians, the Ethiopians, the Libyans, and the Canaanites. Now, we learned also that Ham did something to Noah. He had to walk backwards and he lost the birthright. And so his first son lost his birthright. So the birthrights ended up going to Joseph's two twin sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. We'll learn that later. But let's find out about these people, the so called people who are Ashkenazi. And we'll read about that in Genesis chapter 10. And let's read about these people who moved to the land of Khazaria, who are called Khazarian Jews, because they converted a long time ago. So let's read and see exactly what Arthur said because he was actually a Jewish man and he wrote about them. It says about the time when Charlemagne was crowned emperor in the west and eastern confines of Europe, between the Caucasus and the Volga, were ruled by a Jewish state known as the Khazar Empire. At the peak of its power, from the 7th to the 10th century AD, it played a significant part in shaping the dynasties of medieval and consequently of modern Europe. The Byzantine Empire and historian Constantine Prothrogenius in 1913 to 959 must have been well aware of this when he recorded this in his treatise on the court protocol. The letters addressed to the Pope in Rome, and similar to those to the Emperor of the West, had a gold seal worth two solid, a gold seal soldi attached to them, whereas the messages to the king of the Khazars displayed a seal worth 3 solidi, or I guess that's the name of the money at that time, solidi. This was not flattery, but real politics. So it was real politics. In the period with which we're concerned, wrote Bury, it is probable that the Khan of the Khazars was of little less importance in the view of the imperial foreign policy than Charles the Great and his successors. The country of the Khazars, a people of Turkish stock. So we got to understand that these people who you see in Ukraine and the ones that you see in Turkey are basically the same people who migrated over time. And a lot of times when you see Turkey going through these earthquakes, all of these um, disasters, it's because you got to go to the people who started a lot of what's going on right now in the world. And the Turks were the ones who actually are the original converts. Let me read. The country of Khazar, a people of Turkish stock, occupied strategic key positions in the vital gateway between the Black Sea and the Caspian, whereas the great eastern powers of the period confronted each other. It acted as a buffer protecting Byzantium against invasions by lusty barbarian tribesmen of the northern steppes, Bulgars, Magyars, and Parthenoges, etc., and later the Vikings and the Russians. But equally, or even more important, both from the point of view of the Byzantine diplomacy and of European history, is the fact that the Khazar armies effectively blocked the Arab avalanche in its most devastating early stages, and thus prevented the Muslims' conquest in Eastern Europe. Professor Dunlap of Columbia University, a leading authority on the history of the Khazars, has given a concise summary of this decisive yet virtually unknown episode. The Khazar country lay across the natural line of advance of the Arabs within a few years of the death of Muhammad, in in 632 AD. The armies of the Caliphate, sweeping northwards through the wreckage of two empires and carrying all before them, reached a great mountain barrier of the Caucasus. This barrier once passed a royal lay open to the lands of Eastern Europe. As it was on the line of the Caucasus, the Arabs met the forces of an organized military power, which effectively prevented them from extending their conquests in this direction. The wars of the Arabs and the Khazars, which lasted more than 100 years, though little known, have thus considerable historic importance. The Franks, the Franks of Charles Martel on the field of Tours turned the tide of the Arab invasion. At about the same time, the threat of Europe in the east was hardly less acute. The victorious Muslims were met and held by the forces of the Khazars kingdom. It can scarcely be held by the forces of the Khazars kingdom. It can be scarcely be doubted that but for the existence of the Khazars in the region north of the Caucasus Byzantine, the bulwark of European civilization in the east would have found itself outflanked by the Arabs, and the history of the Christian Islam might well have been very different from what we know today. It is perhaps not surprising to give these circumstances that in 732, after a resounding Khazar victory over the Arabs, the future emperor Constantine V married a Khazar princess. So Constantine married a Khazar princess. In due time, their son became emperor, Leo VI, known as Leo the Khazar. Ironically, the last battle in the war in 737 ended in a Khazar defeat, but by the time of the impetus of the Muslim Holy War was spent, the Caliphate was rocked by internal dissensions, and the Arab invaders retracted their steps across the Caucasus without having gained a prominent foothold in the north, whereas the Khazars became more powerful than they had previously been. A few years later, probably in about 740, the king and his court and the military ruling class embraced the Jewish faith. So this happened about 740. And Judaism became the state religion of the Khazars. No doubt their contemporaries were astonished by this decision, as modern scholars were when they came across the evidence of the Arab, Byzantine, Russian, and Hebrew sources. One of the most recent comments is found in a work by Hungarian Marxist historian Dr. Anthel Bartha. His book, The Migra Society in 8th and 9th centuries, has several chapters on Khazars, as during most of the period the Hungarians were ruled by them. Yet their conversion to Judaism is discussed in a single paragraph with obvious embarrassment as it reads. Our investigation cannot go into problems pertaining to the history and ideas of what we must call a reader's attention. The matter of the Khazar kingdom state religion. It was a Jewish faith which became an official religion of the ruling strata of the society. So, needless to say, and keep reading, needless to say, the acceptance of the Jewish faith as the state religions of an ethnically non-Jewish people, get this, an ethnically non-Jewish people, could be a subject of interesting speculation. We shall, however, confine ourselves to the remarks of this official conversation in defiance of Christians proselytizing by Byzantine Muslims influence from the East, and in spite of the political pressure of these two powers to a religion which had no support from any political power but was persecuted by nearly all, has come to a surprise to all historians concerned with the Khazars, and cannot be considered an accidental, but must be regarded as a sign of independent policy pursued by that kingdom. So we are learning from this book. When you read Revelation 2, when you read Genesis 10, and in Genesis 10, it lets you know, and when you go to verse 6, and the sons of Ham, Cush, Mizraim, Put, Canaan, and the sons of Cush, Sheva, Ramah, and the sons of Deodim. And it says, where I'm at, I want to go to verse 3. I'm going to go to verse 3. Genesis 10, verse 3, it says, and the son of Gomer is Ashkenaz, Raphet, and Tagorma. And we know that Ashkenaz is the Ashkenazi Jews who ended up in the land of Khazaria. I hope this gave you a little information about why Turkey is going what it's going through, about who the people who are in Israel, they're actually old Turks, and who these people truly are.